Okay, so mistakes. Today we're gonna be looking at mistakes in language learning and particularly why they are so important and why they're challenging and embarrassing and difficult and basically everything there is about mistakes. I might not address every single topic about making mistakes in language learning, but I am going to share with you my experience in learning and the importance of making these mistakes, which we'll get into a little bit more, and also some of the different kinds of mistakes that native speakers make and that non-native speakers make. Alright, so the very first thing I want to get out there is that when you are learning another language, and any language that it is, you're going to make so many mistakes. So many. And I know this because I've made a lot of mistakes in Spanish, and I've made a lot of mistakes in English, in my native language, and then of course in French I make very much nothing but mistakes at this point. But whether it's your native language or a language that you're learning, you're going to make mistakes. They're just different types of mistakes that non-native speakers make and that native speakers make. So I feel like this is a very important concept to address because a lot of people think that because someone is a non-native speaker of a language, that they might be inferior in some way. And while there are definitely non-native speakers who have a level that is lower than a native speaker, there are also native speakers who have a level that is lower than a non-native speaker of that language. And there are also levels where maybe one isn't higher or lower than the other. They might be about the same levels, but they'll still make mistakes. They'll just make different kinds of mistakes. So for example, like as an English speaker, if you are a native speaker, you probably make mistakes. Like something that I hear with the subjunctive is people say like, oh, I wish I were this, or oh, and they say I wish I was instead of I wish I were. So something like that, or confusing different forms of your. And those are mistakes that native speakers make in that language. And while those might also be mistakes that non-native speakers make, non-native speakers tend to make more mistakes with prepositions and pronunciation and idioms and just things that are, more difficult to learn through grammar and through studying the language instead of through experiencing it and hearing how it's used. And the thing with language is that there really isn't a right or a wrong, and even like a right or a wrong kind of mistake, or kind of, I know it's kind of weird to say like a wrong mistake, but there really isn't. And if you think of it from the perspective of different dialects and different accents, like even in English, you have the American dialect, and then you have British, and you have Australian. You have so many different dialects of English, and they all vary. There are differences in the grammar, and there's differences in the pronunciation. There's so much, and even just in the United States, there are different dialects of English. And there's English that you use in an academic setting, there's English that you use with your friends, there's different vernaculars of English, and none of it's right or wrong, it just is. So what I want to get across is that there are so many mistakes to be made in learning a language, and those mistakes are not necessarily bad. Like, just because you make a mistake in a language doesn't mean that you're not competent in communicating in that language. So for this reason, I am going to be doing some more Spanish videos, like all Spanish videos on my channel, because I want to start documenting my Spanish progress, and because I want to share honestly what my level of Spanish is, which if you've watched my last video in this series, you saw a little bit of that. If you didn't, you can take a look at it here. And I just really want you guys to have more confidence in speaking your language. And I do say speaking instead of like writing or reading because those are typically easier for people because you have more time to think about what you're going to say, and speech is language. Like the writing and reading, that is a record of language. So the speech, that's the actual language. And what it is evolves, and it's a way to communicate, and it doesn't always follow the rules of the grammar. And it's really just okay to make some mistakes. And like you guys will see here on Saturday that I'm gonna make mistakes when I'm speaking Spanish, and I'm sure that I'm making mistakes when I'm speaking English now because we don't speak like a textbook. We don't speak with perfect grammar. It just isn't that way. And in general, the mistakes that non-natives make, they're typically more noticeable to natives and to non-natives and to anyone, and they're seen as kind of unacceptable for the mistakes that non-natives make, but mistakes that native speakers make are sort of more acceptable. And I say that in the terms of like what I see in society and like what I see when I speak with people. I think that it should be acceptable either way because that's just what we are. There is no perfection in anything, not in language learning, not in speaking, in writing, in anything. And that's really what makes it yours. What makes it your speech and your practice. And you really should be proud of the progress that you have and your abilities in your language, and be proud of your mistakes because it takes a lot of courage to get out there and to practice and to make those mistakes and learn from them. So don't be embarrassed and don't feel like you have to be perfect because you're not going to be. You're never going to be perfect. I'm never going to be perfect. So that's what I really want to get across to you guys today, is that making mistakes in learning a language is so important, and not just because like you have to make the mistake to learn, but because you have to get comfortable making those mistakes, and it just needs to become part of who you are, and you need to accept this is my level, and don't compare yourself to someone else. Compare yourself just to yourself, because there is always going to be someone out there who is better, who is more fluent, more proficient, and there's always going to be someone who has a lower level. So there's always going to be some comparison there, and it really doesn't show your progress. Like the only way that you can measure how well you are doing is to compare to yourself. So that's part of the reason that I'm going to start documenting some of my Spanish progress, is because I want to compare myself to myself in the future. And also because I want to show you guys a strategy for practicing your language by recording yourself and watching yourself and listening to yourself and the mistakes that you make and correcting them and learning from them. And I really just want to share everything that I know about learning, and specifically about language learning, that has helped me, so that you guys can learn some of my strategies, or at least see them and see how I speak and how I make mistakes. Even though I'm a teacher, I make mistakes, a lot of them, and I want you guys to see that. Alright, so make sure to come back here on Saturday to see my Spanish video. If you are subscribed and you'll have the notifications turned on, then you'll see an update when that video comes out on Saturday. And until then, keep practicing your Spanish and whatever languages you're learning. And I will see you guys back here in a few days. Ciao!